How are we going to deal with this? Well, we've asked the President, the Minister of Police, the Minister of Transport to take certain action and to take the action quickly, and unfortunately that hasn't happened.
South Africa is experiencing a wave of violent protests, which are affecting a variety of industries, including the trucking industry. Joining me to discuss is the CEO of the Road Freight Association, Gavin Kelly. Gavin joins us again on the CRA channel. Gavin, the last time you joined us was in November 2020 when there were a series of violent protests against the trucking industry, and we're seeing that again with the events of this previous weekend. Could you tell our viewers what are the causes of the violence this time around?
Good afternoon, David, and good afternoon to all your viewers. I think this has been an incredible 4 days for us, bearing the brunt in this initial phase of violence around something that has really got nothing to do with the road freight industry. We've just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But if we take a look at your opening statement in terms of where does this start, or why are we where we are, it would seem it has the roots in the incarceration of the previous president of the country. And I'm not going to go down the merits of that case at all. We all know that there was a group of people who were against this and then said that they would not allow this to happen. And then they've decided, well, he now needs to be released. And until he's released, they are protesting, which, you know, all in itself is freedom of speech. We get that. And if there were a couple of guys, and I use the term loosely, a couple of guys standing on the side of the road with some posters and placards and chanting and singing, well, fine, great. You can raise your voice. And I think everyone's allowed to do that. We are allowed to raise a voice of dissent. What is concerning, though, is that that was not in any manner the way in which any dissent was raised. This went into violent action at the get-go, and they targeted, this grouping targeted the busiest freight route in the country, the N3, and the N3 links the port of Durban with the hinterland of Africa. It has not only South African local trucks moving up and down, it has a fair amount of foreign trucks who are moving goods from foreign countries through the port of Natal and taking goods back to their countries. So a clever choice if you wanted to really make an impact. What was the impact? Burning of trucks. 32 trucks burnt. And for no rhyme or reason. They didn't incarcerate the president. I don't think half of those drivers even were aware of what was happening. Thank goodness, unlike what we've seen before, the drivers have not been harmed. The co-drivers and the loaders that are there with them weren't harmed. They were pulled out of the cabs and the trucks were burnt. And we've now seen a fair amount of looting happening. And the question has been, why are we facing the brunt of this? Well, the obvious answer is A, there's a fair amount of goods that can be looted and can be used and resold. Secondly, trucks move slowly. They stop in places where there's a bit of congestion like toll roads, and that's what happened at Mooi River, is they caught them at the toll route and then they could burn them all together. And then finally, obviously, it brings a fair amount of media attention. When you burn a truck, there's quite a big fire. When you burn, a small little car or just a tire, there isn't much.
Enjoying this analysis? Click here to sign up for our 30-day free trial for more content from the CIA.
How are we going to deal with this? Why should we as citizens bear the brunt of this? And the road freight industry has borne the brunt of this. And we've seen in the last day that retail commercial centers have been attacked. There's been a huge center in Pietermaritzburg that's been attacked. And now in Gauteng, we're seeing warehouses being stormed, being broken into. How are we going to deal with this? Well, we've asked the President, the Minister of Police, the Minister of Transport to take certain action and to take the action quickly. And unfortunately, that hasn't happened. You need to deal with those people who, to my mind, exceed that freedom of speech. When you start calling and inciting violence and calling for violence and calling for it in a manner that is not normal freedom of speech, they need to be dealt with. And this isn't new. This has been with us for at least 3 years. You'll recall the whole foreign driver incident, similar sort of tactics, absolute violence, irrespective of who's targeted. So that needs to be addressed. And thankfully, in the last half hour or so, we've seen reports that the National Defence Force is being moved into KZN. But is it a little bit too late? Well, hopefully the police and the Defence Force are going to get a lid on this and bring back stability to the country. Because as far as a destination or a transit country, people are saying, this is not a place to do business in, this is not a place to invest in, and definitely not a place to move my goods through.
So just for our viewers, the context of this discussion is 2:00 on Monday. When we last spoke late last year, Gavin, that was about the attacks on foreign drivers specifically. But as you pointed out in that video, it was actually South African nationals who ended up being killed in some of those attacks. And you suggested that that was perhaps not the issue, that it was more akin to the violence that was being experienced in the construction industry, for example. Just last week, we saw the incident with Rio Tinto and the Richards Bay Minerals facility in KZN. So it seems like KZN has become a center of lawlessness and targeted attacks against industry. Do you care to comment on that?
Sure, David, that's an interesting one. And I don't profess to be a political analyst or know much about politics, but it is interesting that a fair amount of this violent activity does start in KZN. Now, could that be because of groupings who are supporting an individual or a policy or belief system? Could it be that there are groupings of individuals trying to protect themselves? It's a very good question. But yes, that is where we've seen the majority of these violent attacks in definitely the last 5 years having started. So there needs to be or must be some sort of link. Hence, our comment to the South African police services and the intelligence services that surely you must have information on who is behind this or who is instigating this. And it doesn't seem to be different people. You're quite correct.
Gavin, as an industry body representing the Freight Association, what steps are you going to be taking to try to protect your members' interests in this episode?
Well, of course, we can't police the roads. That's just not our mandate. And if the police are not getting it right, how much hope do we have? We can't shoot back at or arrest or detain people if we find them doing what they're doing. So that's out of our hands. What we do is we share information as we get the information from various sources, and the South African Police Services is one of them. Obviously, we have other resources and sources around the country that feed information into us, and we distribute that to our members on our various groups. And then the members need to make a call as to whether they're going to operate. Now, one of the things that we've been asked to do is to call for a general strike is the wrong word, but a general stop in moving of freight. A lot of the freight that's moving is essential. It's foods, it's medicines. In some cases, it's oxygen for hospitals. I mean, you know what COVID sort of situation we're in. It's fuel for ambulances and keep all other sorts of vehicles going, even the South African police. So we can't just stop the transportation around. What we do is we look at the peak periods and we try and get people to stay in their depots or find safe places. And of course, there's a little bit of a conundrum there, because if you now all go and park in a truck stop, is that not a good target? You know, now have 60 trucks all clambered together. So it's a difficult one to answer, David. It's really trying to make sure that the hotspots are identified, that we get the SAPs there as soon as possible, that they, in actual fact, don't just stand there and watch it. They do something, and then trying to keep, you know, the trucks off the road as best we can, because remember, people have contracts that they need to honor. They need to ensure that they have their return loads, because a lot of guys only have single loads. So they've got to find those return loads. It's trying to keep everyone as safe as possible. But at the end of the day, each company has to decide on their own whether they're going to operate or not. Nobody can force them to operate, just as much as we can't force them not to operate.
Gavin, last year when we spoke in around November, you had written a letter to the president highlighting some of the key risks facing the trucking industry. Did you ever get a response from the presidency?
Yes, we did, David. We got acknowledgement of receipt. And it was about a week later that the president made a statement, and I did note that in what he had said, there were some of my paragraphs and some of the things I'd said. As happened on Sunday night, we had spoken to the president, we'd made a press release, and once again, he had mentioned a couple of things that we had mentioned. So I don't think that we have, in the last couple of years, had a deaf ear turned to us from government. I think that there's probably three things at play here. The first is that sometimes when you hear the responses, it seems as if they are out of touch with reality, and so be it. The second thing is that do they really, when I say they, people like the South African Police Services and the intelligence services have the capacity, the expertise and the resources to do what they need to do? And then I think finally, and I know the advocate Dali Mpofu raised it in a recent court appearance, but I think the specter of Marikana still resides with us, and the police are somewhat reluctant to be heavy-handed, but we need to take good action. We need to take harsh action, and harsh doesn't mean you're brutal. Harsh means you take the action that is necessary to stop the sort of violence, that you investigate, get hold of the ringleaders, and you bring them to book. And I think those are the three things that have been sorely lacking or have been hog-tying us in the last couple of years.
Gavin Kelly, thank you very much for joining us on the Centre for Risk Analysis. We at the CRA are providing updates to our clients as these events unfold. So if you would like to get in touch with us to discuss the key risks facing your business in this environment, please do follow the link in the description below, and we'd be happy to share some of our insights with you. That's it from me, David Ansara. Until next time, take care.